Welcome back to DC Central, and in today's video we're going to be breaking down and reviewing The Flash Season 7 Episode 2, otherwise entitled The Speed of Thought. And if you have not seen this episode, make sure you go and do so before proceeding with this review, as it will be filled with spoilers. You know, it's still kind of hard to believe that The Flash is finally back on our screens. It's been so long since the last episodes of Season 6, it still feels bizarre to actually say that The Flash is back and to say these classic intros as I review them. But The Flash Season 7, it's still going strong. This second episode was absolutely incredible, and the main word I have to use to describe this episode is surprising. This episode was filled to the brim with surprises, and though I thought the first episode was absolutely fantastic and a great premiere and was full of surprises in and of itself, this episode was just surprise from scene to scene, and it constantly kept me on the edge of my seat. And by the end of the episode, I was absolutely left on hanging strings, just so excited to see what the next episode is going to be. Also, I must say, it was so nice to have Cisco and Caitlin back in this episode. You know, they weren't in the first episode, and, you know, following on from what happened at the end of Season 6, obviously we had to kind of say, and we had to carry on those storylines a little bit longer, so that's why they weren't in the first episode, but having them back here was really great. We got to see Cisco and Caitlin react to the death of Wells, or the Wells is, and we also got to see Cisco talking about Atlantean tech, which was really cool, like, obviously from what we know of him, when we last saw him in Season 6, he was actually traveling to Atlantis. I'm kind of sad that we didn't get to see a little bit more of that, or perhaps any more talk of his adventures in Atlantis. You know, that's kind of a big thing to kind of throw into the show and throw into the Arrowverse, the fact that Atlantis exists, because obviously that hints at a larger world beneath the sea and hints at Aquaman and things like that. But hopefully maybe in the future we'll get to see more of that. But it was still really great to have them back. I missed Carlos, I missed Danielle, so it was really nice to have them back both on the show in fighting form. Now, the opening scene of this episode was really damn cool, as we got to see this memorial to Wells, and it was really nice because it's this area of Star Labs that we've never really seen before. It was like this memorial room that was filled with different Easter eggs and little references to previous characters that we had on the show. You know, and not only was it kind of like Wells's little funeral among the people that knew him, but also in the room itself we got to see other artifacts from previous characters. Like we got to see Ronnie Raymond's Firestorm Matrix. There was also a jacket there, which I couldn't tell if it was Jesse Quick or Trajectory, but it was one of the two. Nora's jacket was in there as well, and I believe someone said as well, I think Oliver's mask is apparently in there as well. So really awesome stuff, like a really great little memorial room. I wish we could have seen a little bit more of it and actually explored it a little bit more, see if there are any other Easter eggs, but it's just nice to see that Star Labs actually keeps a little memorial for all the characters that they've lost across this journey so far. But that leads me into my first point about this episode, which is Barry's new power that he gets in this episode, which is the power of increased thinking speed, or speed thinking, which obviously ties into the episode title, The Speed of Thought. Now, when I first heard about this, when I first heard that, you know, Barry was going to be getting speed thinking, I kind of thought that's kind of lame. It's kind of a lame power. And to be honest, in this episode, I was kind of surprised because I actually came around on it and I actually thought, actually, that's pretty cool what they do with it. I do feel like that this power would have been incredibly OP and just too big to be on the show for more than this episode. And obviously, by the end of it, that power is now gone. Because it definitely would have been way too OP with what they do with it in this episode. But the speed thinking, it could have been really lame, but they did it in a pretty cool way, and the way they span a really interesting little story and conflict out of it, I thought was really interesting. Barry definitely could have used with this power in Season 4 when dealing with the Thinker, but I thought it was actually pretty cool. One thing I would have liked to have seen, though, a little bit more, I guess maybe they didn't want to spend any VFX budget on this, given the fact that this power was gone by the end of the episode. But I would have loved to have seen the thinking actually visualized a little bit. Like, do you remember back in the pilot of The Flash? I've spoken about this many times before, but do you remember back in the pilot of The Flash where we saw Barry investigating a crime scene? It was actually sort of like visualized in his head, and we got to see how he was thinking and stuff like that. I have always said I wish they would bring that back. And I would love to have seen it here. Like, this would have been the perfect opportunity to use those scenes as reference, because, you know, this was meant to be Barry thinking, and we got a couple of shots where the camera was just kind of focused on Barry as we saw him thinking, but we didn't actually see what he was thinking or was able to get any idea of what he was thinking in his head. I would have loved to have actually seen that visualized a little bit more, because it was a little bit lazily done in that sense. Not that it was lazy, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, I would have loved to have seen a bit more visualization of that concept. But what it led to was really interesting, because you basically have Barry who, after going into the artificial speed force and gaining his speed back, not only does he gain this power, but because of what they put into it to kind of counteract the negative effects, and counteract negative emotions that would have come out of it, like we saw with Reverse Flash. What they actually did was they accidentally removed all of Barry's emotions. So instead of having no negative or positive emotions, he's literally an emotionless robot. And that's basically what Barry is in this episode. And it's kind of crazy because when he first puts up the speed, he seems kind of normal. Like when he's first doing the speed thinking, he seems kind of just normal Barry. But then eventually you see him just become this analytical robot pretty much, who's just talking with no emotion, doesn't care about anybody around him, is just doing whatever the logical choice is. And he's even more smart than Gideon, which was really interesting. We actually see Barry talk to Gideon in this episode, and Gideon thanks him for the more, I believe she says the more efficient direction or something like that. And Barry was awful in this episode, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that Barry was, the character was awful or Grant was awful. I just mean as a person, like, he was awful in this episode because, again, he had no emotions. And it really led to an interesting conflict between Barry and Cisco because you have this kind of dynamic between them where Cisco is just getting increasingly annoyed and increasingly aware of Barry's situation, and when he eventually calls Camilla disposable, that just makes him snap, and we get this really cool fight scene. Well, not a fight scene, but we get to see like this standoff between Team Flash and Barry, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But it was really cool. Again, the speed thinking, I didn't expect to like it. I thought it was going to be super, super dumb. And again, I think if it had gone on more than this episode, and if we would have seen it continue on, I think it could have gone down that direction, and again, it would have been really overpowered. But for this one episode story, I think it worked quite well, and again, it kind of flipped me around on the idea. And the next major part of the episode that I could not believe my eyes when I saw was Killer Frost with speed. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we do kind of have this standoff between Team Flash and Barry, and it eventually leads to Killer Frost injecting herself with Velocity X and getting Speedster powers, and this was incredible. We got to see this fantastic Speedster fight between Barry and Caitlin, which we've not had in a while. We got to see how Caitlin as Killer Frost kind of looked as a Speedster and with her own Speedster powers. We even got to see her combine her Speedster and Frost powers. We got to see her throw what was basically her equivalent of Barry's Lightning Punch, but with a Frost Blast kind of inside of it, so we got to see it throw at lightning speed. That was incredible, and it was just great. And on top of that, we also had like this fight as well with Allegra, obviously, who she has her own UV powers and stuff like that, but we got to see it in Nash's gear, which was kind of cool. I'm wondering if this is hinting at potentially her joining the team in a more full front way, and potentially, if she's a part of the team and she's a metahuman, which she is, I imagine Cisco is probably going to get her own costume at some point, right? So maybe this was that hinting towards that, and maybe it's going to be like a cross between Nash's gear and like her own suit or something like that. That would be really super cool. So this fight with Barry and Caitlin, it was just amazing. Like, it's one of those, like, honestly, like fan fiction moments, writing what if Killer Frost got speed. It was like that, and it was really cool. And, it was kind of like when Iris got speed a couple seasons ago, back in Season 4. Like, that was a really cool idea, and seeing that executed was really great. And kind of a similar thing here with Caitlin getting speed. It was just really damn cool, really awesome, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I would honestly would love to see in the future other major characters on The Flash get powers like that, get speed and stuff like that. Just see how they would react to it and see what they would do with it. I think it's pretty awesome. Now, the big thing that really happens in this episode in terms of the story is we actually see Iris brought back into the real world. So Iris is no longer stuck in the Mirrorverse, and this I'm really happy to see, because I do feel like this Mirrorverse storyline feels a tad dragged out to me. Nothing horrendous, like this isn't like Cicada back in Season 5, like it's definitely a lot better than that, a hell of a lot better than that. But it was getting to the point for me where I feel like she has been in there for a bit of a long time now, and I was kind of getting ready to move past it. And I don't know if it's because of the big break in between the seasons and because of COVID and stuff like that, because obviously if that had never happened, this whole storyline would have been wrapped up in Season 6 and would be in a whole new storyline at this point. So I don't know if it's because of that it feels dragged out, because I don't remember it feeling dragged out back in the end of Season 6. So I don't know if it is just the fact we've had that big extended break that makes it feel this way. But either way, I'm happy to see Iris out of the Mirrorverse. I nearly said out of the Arrowverse then. Out of the Mirrorverse, because it's just really great to have Candace back, because I feel like her role in the show has kind of been sidelined. While she's been in the Mirrorverse. Like, obviously we've had scenes with her, we've had scenes between her and Eva McCulloch and stuff like that, but actually seeing her back in the real world is really great to see. Obviously this is kind of like a consequence because Barry brought her out and left Camilla and Singh in there, so I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that. Obviously with Iris kind of being brought back against her own will, it was kind of interesting, so I'm interested to see what they do with that. And again, it's just nice to have Iris back, and this was kind of left on a cliffhanger as we have her come out of the Mirrorverse. She sees Barry and then basically collapses, and then just before Barry went into the Mirrorverse to get her, or open the portals to the Mirrorverse, we actually see him take out Cisco, Caitlin, and Allegra. So basically his entire team is defeated by the end of the episode by him. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do with this going into the next episode. We're also left on a cliffhanger with Eva McCulloch, which in this episode she's actually exposed to the public. Barry exposes her live on a talk show, and definitely not a route I expected the season to go, but there you go. But we also see her kind of sat by the mirror and basically saying, you know, this isn't my world, I'm not from this world, and then eventually she decides, well, what if I am? And this then leads to a scene in CCPD where we see a cop go into an elevator and get dragged into the Mirrorverse. So I'm wondering what this means. I'm wondering if this is Eva perhaps taking on another body potentially, or if this is her kind of getting another person from the Mirrorverse, like bringing them out into the real world to maybe create like an army or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what route they're going to go down with that. I feel like the second one is a lot more likely, just because we are ramping up, like, because the next episode of the season would have been the season finale of season 6, so I imagine we're going to have to set up something big for the team to fight. You know, whereas if she just goes into another body, that's a bit of a weird direction to go for what would have been the end of the season. So I think that this is her kind of maybe getting an army together. I think that's probably what that's going to be. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do with that. And again, really cool cliffhanger to end on. But wait, there's one more cliffhanger as well. Not only did we have those two, but we've got a final big one, which was a real bombshell. As we see the return of Harrison Wells, played by Tom Cavanagh. Obviously, we lost Wells, or the Welleses, last episode, and we thought, well, what's going to happen with the character now? What's Tom Cavanagh going to do? Because there's been no reports of Tom Cavanagh leaving the show, so what's going to happen? So we get a flashback to a scene which I don't believe was ever shot. Like, I don't know if we ever saw, well, no, we did see this, I'm pretty sure, back in season 1, where we actually get to see Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, played by Matt Letcher, take over the body of Harrison Wells, and that's of course what happened in season 1, which led to the big betrayal and things like that, blah 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 blah. But what we then see is the grave that was kind of built for Harrison Wells' actual original body, and we see him reanimated with this kind of green energy. He kind of gets reanimated and brought back to life, and we see the original Harrison Wells, like the original OG Earth 1 Harrison Wells, brought back from the dead. So what does this mean? Who is this version of Harrison Wells? Has he been brought back to life? If so, by who? I've seen a lot of people suggest that this green energy looks similar to the Mirrorverse kind of particles, so is this Eva's doing? And is this just going to be like a one-episode thing for the finale, or what's going on? Is this how Tom Cavanagh returns to the show? Like, obviously, in the last review I did for episode 1, I said that I believe Tom Cavanagh was actually going to play Ralph Dibny. This development perhaps suggests that that may not be the case anymore, but we will see. But either way, the OG Harrison Wells is back, so I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with this. And, you know, these big cliffhangers, this was such a big cliffhanger to end on for this episode, because we had 3 cliffhangers from what I can tell. You know, basically each of the major storylines had their own cliffhanger. And I've not seen an episode of the Arrowverse left on a cliffhanger like this since, like, the season 5 finale of Arrow. You know, obviously the season 5 finale of Arrow ended with basically the entire cast potentially dead. Which was pretty huge to leave on before we got to season 6 where they ruined it. But this was a pretty big cliffhanger, so I'm very excited for next week's episode, which again, if you remember, would have been the original season 6 finale. So it's going to be a big episode next week, so I'm excited to see what they're going to do with that. Overall, though, a great episode for The Flash this week. Again, a fantastic, strong episode for the second episode of Season 7. I'm just loving The Flash right now. Like, I'm loving having it back, and you know, Eric Wallace is just continuing to do a wonderful job with The Flash so far as a showrunner. Like, Season 6 was such a great return to form for me, and Season 7 so far has been great. Obviously, it's kind of difficult to judge at the moment because these episodes are technically really still a part of Season 6, so once we get out of this Eva McCulloch Mirrorverse arc, I'm excited to see what Season 7 actually is, because obviously this is still just wrapping up Season 6's story, so I'm interested to see what they actually do when we get into the new story for the season. But I'm loving this episode. It was really great. I don't know which episode I liked more of this week or last week. I think I liked last week just a tad bit more, just because of the emotion and the humor that was in it, but overall still an incredibly strong episode, and I absolutely loved it. But what do you guys think? Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Did you enjoy this week's episode of The Flash? And if so, let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more DC content like this and Flash reviews just like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.